Welcome back, Year 10, to Week 2. How exciting is this? Another lesson on photosynthesis. So today we're looking at making the most of photosynthesis as you're making the most of being at home. So this is Miss Rigoletto presenting from Knole Academy, and today we're going to be looking at the factors that affect the rate of photosynthesis and how they interact. And we're going to be looking at describing how we can manipulate the growing environment to increase the yield. So that's how much product we get from photosynthesis. So as we've seen in the news, there has lots and lots of food shortages at the moment, and we need to ensure that we are producing as much yield as possible to ensure that we can meet demand. So this is our equation. So just a quick quiz. Rather than a 1 to 10 today, we're going to ask you to draw. Yes, your artistic ability will be tested here. I want you to just sketch a greenhouse. It doesn't have to be as intricate as the one that I've got on here on the screen. It can simply be a sort of basic box with a roof. Okay, and you're going to design your perfect greenhouse. So what would you give you an optimum yield? So optimum means the maximum amount that we could make from the plants that we're given. So you're going to label all your features that would allow you to increase the rate of photosynthesis. You can add what you want. You might want to add some lights. You might want to add other things. Pause the video now and add what you feel would be needed to be put in your greenhouse to make it as productive as possible, just like you are now. So let's see what you've got. So on my perfect greenhouse, I've got some additional lighting, so to ensure there's optimal levels and wavelengths of light. I've also got some heating. Some greenhouses have biofuel burners, and they allow us to keep the temperature at the optimum level. Again, there's that optimum. Also, they produce CO2. Remember, biofuel is carbon neutral, like we've already talked about in lesson 4. Irrigation systems and hydroponics. We'll talk about a bit those in a minute, but they're all about delivering water and the nutrients required to ensure that the plant is receiving the optimum amount of both nutrients and water. Windows, okay, so these can open and shut. Some of them have blinds on them. This is controlling temperature, controlling light. Also, some of them have foil blinds to reflect the heat back in to provide insulation in the colder months. They are a contained environment, therefore they are protected from extremes of weather and pests. It's easier to control pests within this environment. You're not going to get any mice coming in and nibbling your fruits. So, scientists really are interested because actually this is where business and science join together to ensure that we are producing the most we can for as little as we can. So we want to be getting our greenhouse to work as fast as it can to produce some fruits and flowers, potentially out of season, so growing when they're not really expected. So roses tend to flower in the summer, not on Valentine's Day. Maybe we want strawberries in December and not in June. So all of these things have to be done in our greenhouse. So what we're doing here is our greenhouse creates an artificial environment, and that artificial environment is there for a whole range of reasons. It can allow plants to fruit earlier, grow faster, giving us that, again, maximum yield. It makes sometimes fruits and foods and flowers easier to harvest, okay, and they can be grown out of season. Now, I've got a really interesting clip that I've added to the Show My Homework, which is all about greenhouses and how Iceland have vertical greenhouses. So they literally have walls of tomatoes growing. Have a look at that. Check it out. It's quite interesting. Also, it's interesting on how environmentally friendly their greenhouses are. So some factors are really costly to increase. So if I've got my greenhouse and I'm having to provide loads and loads of heating, that would be expensive. Okay, and actually it might not have a huge amount of impact on the yield of what I'm trying to produce. So we've got to balance the costs of putting that mechanism in place and the increase in profit. So if it's going to cost you 500 quid to heat your greenhouse by 10 more degrees, but you're only going to get £100 worth more profit, then it's uneconomical. So this idea of tying yield to economy is really important. I would suggest that you look at the graph. The graph shows me that actually by increasing the amount of CO2, I can increase the yield. However, by then increasing the temperature again and having a high level of CO2, I can increase the yield even further. What we would need to know in order to make a decision as to whether or not that increase in temperature was worth it was what would be the increased profit from our fruit and or vegetables or plants, and what was the cost. Okay, what was the cost? So we have some optional extras when we're thinking about growing plants in a greenhouse. So we can have hydroponics and we can have greenhouses. So we have hydroponic growing systems, and these are really important. The hydroponics, we don't have any soil. We might use something called vermiculite, but you don't really need to know about that. All that we know is that the bare roots are literally misted with a nutrient solution. So it have water sprayed on them at a regular interval, and that means that we don't have any dirt. It's easier to harvest. You might want to grow things like carrots here, or initially small plugs of plants to then to tray up later for maybe hanging baskets. Propane. Now propane burners, they burn hydrocarbons. Again, we're using a fossil fuel, so not great. It does produce CO2 though. It would also produce some heat. But because glass is quite a reasonable conductor of heat, we're going to lose a lot of that heat outside the glass. So it's primarily for producing that extra CO2, because we remember that there are reactants that we need to increase the presence of to increase the rate of photosynthesis. Oh, here's a big one, thermostatically-controlled vents. So these are computerized window openers, okay? And this will basically open the windows as the temperatures get too hot and close them when they get too cold. Now we need to again link that to the idea of temperature being a limiting factor. Remember that lovely graph where it goes up a bit and then drops off. And that's because enzymes are denatured. They're going to splice in that information further down in questions to see, do you remember these things? So think about it. Maybe take a moment to sketch that graph. So photosynthesis obviously doesn't take place at night because there is no light, no photons providing that energy for the chloroplast. So therefore, what we've now got to do is try and increase our day length. So artificial lighting in the winter months can increase our day length from 8 hours to maybe 12, 15 hours. But also, what we can also do is increase it so the plants are growing 24 hours a day. That means they're producing glucose 24 hours a day. And that is really key because that shortens our growing period, which means rather than maybe having 2 crops a year, we can maybe move to 3 or 4 crops a year. So you're getting almost double the profit. Ka-ching. So irrigation systems. It brings water to the places where water is not. Exciting stuff. Sometimes big greenhouses have huge water collection systems where they use all of the rainwater that is fallen onto the roofs, and they collect it all up, and they're trying to ensure the amount of water that they supply is exactly what the plant needs to ensure that water is available for photosynthesis. Make sure you've got those 5 points down and you can explain the importance of each of those points. A tomato plant needs 600 joules of light energy per centimetre per day to grow and produce tomatoes. Uses information to suggest the explanation of the pattern of artificial light given to the plants. So if you look, there is no artificial light being given to our plants between May and August. However, outside of these times, there is artificial light being given. So the answer really does need to reflect that. So you need to say that there's no artificial light in summer because the day lengths are long enough and there isn't sufficient natural light that exceeds our 600 joules required. Or it's only given in the winter months where there is insufficient natural light, therefore supplementing by artificial light. Okay, so part 2. Importing tomatoes may be more damaging to the environment than selling tomatoes grown in the UK. Explain why. Now think about this. This is about our bigger global responsibility. Food miles are a problem. Transporting requires fossil fuels. If you're flying food, it's the most damaging way of transporting food around the world. However, you can't pack fresh fruit in a container and take months to get here. All you're going to have is a container full of compost. So you need to think about the fact that it's only going to be used once. The transport uses lots more energy and fuel. And you need to try and tie it into this idea of your carbon footprint, the CO2 release, producing greenhouse gases. All of those are really important. Give yourself a score out of 5. So here's my greenhouse, and it's cost me 2,900 squids, and we're going to be looking at what those costs were made up from. I've got all of these extras that I've paid out for to try and make sure that my greenhouse is as profitable as possible. And what you're going to do is, thinking about all of these extras that we've purchased, you're going to basically write me a sales pitch. You're trying to be selling your ultimate greenhouse to other people, explain why they will benefit, what are the plus sides of all of the additional features we've got, and you're going to email me that sales pitch. So there is no Doddle quiz, there is no Sam Learning, but what I am looking for is you linking the 3 science help ideas at the bottom to your sales pitch. And I'd like this emailed. It can be done straight into the email. It doesn't need to be a Word document, but I would like this emailed to me. Take your time. I'm expecting it by Friday at the latest. See you later.